When I bought this patch of land on the edge of the valley, it wasn't for prestige or pretense, it was for peace. My ranch had everything I needed. Acres of space, no neighbors for miles, and an old well that had quenched this land's thirst for generations. But then the HOA crept in, slithering like a snake in the grass, trying to wrap its coils around every private inch they could find. I wasn't part of their community. I never signed any documents, and I paid my county taxes like every other honest man. Still, that didn't stop them from showing up at my gate with their clipboards and fake smiles. Their newest demand: connect to their community water supply and abandon my well. I told them to go pound sand. What followed was war. First, it started with letters. Then fines I legally didn't owe. Then came a city code enforcer, saying my well was unsafe and non-compliant. Funny my water tested cleaner than anything coming from the HOA taps. I knew something was up. I started documenting everything. And then one day, I woke up to a sound no rancher wants to hear. Concrete trucks rumbling up the private dirt road. By the time I made it outside, it was too late. My wellhead had been destroyed. They'd pumped cement right down into the groundwater shaft, turning my lifeline into a monument of spite. I called the sheriff. I called the city. I called every regulatory agency that would listen. And guess what? No one did. The HOA claimed it was an accident that their contractors had misread a plat map and mistook it for an abandoned access point. It was a lie, through and through. But they had the money, and I was just a guy with a dog and a demolished well. So I went quiet, but not idle. I dug deeper figuratively and literally. While hauling water in for the ranch animals, I began researching every water permit, infrastructure contract, and municipal service record the HOA relied on. And what I found made me grin like a man who just spotted gold. Turns out, the HOA's water supply wasn't owned. It was leased from the city. And the renewal date? It was due in 31 days. I spent the next week getting in touch with every contact I had. A college buddy who worked in the city's public utility department. A cousin who oversaw municipal procurement. A land use attorney who defended me once in a grazing dispute. I built a casino against the HOA directly but against their contract. Because, under a buried clause in the municipal charter, any organization found violating the private property rights of adjacent non-members could have their utility agreements suspended pending investigation.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
Members could have their utility agreements suspended pending investigation. But before filing my formal complaint, I needed a smoking gun. So I rented a drone-silent, long-range, night vision capable. I flew it nightly, capturing footage of board members meeting privately on HOA land, documents spread across picnic tables, one of them even pointing toward my property. One night, I caught a conversation on a parabolic mic: if we cut him off, he'll give in. No one hauls water in this heat for long. That audio alone was damning. I stored everything securely. Meanwhile, my ranch became a fortress. I rigged motion-activated trail cams all along the property border. I got solar panels to keep my core power going. Even started a rain capture system to provide emergency backup water for the animals. My days became a mix of ranching, prepping, and legal work. My nights were filled with strategy and surveillance. I'd never been more focused in my life. Neighbors from outside the HOA started reaching out. One couple had been fined $12,000 over a fence color. Another lost a chicken coop that had been on their land for 15 years. We started forming a network, a quiet alliance. We called ourselves the Independents. By week 3, we had a private encrypted chat group, shared footage, legal advice, and intel on the HLA's next moves. We knew they were pushing for a major water infrastructure overhaul but meant new permits, which had to go through the same city office I was about to shake. Day 29. I filed the complaint. Included were detailed logs, video, audio, sworn statements, and a forensic water assessment that proved the well had been contaminated by the cement plug. I drove it to City Hall myself. Within hours, I received a confirmation letter from the city attorney's office. They were initiating a review. The HOA would have to halt all water-related upgrades until the case was resolved. But I wasn't done. I knew public pressure was power. So I got the media involved. A local news station ran a segment titled "David vs. HOA, the battle for a rancher's water." It went viral. I was invited to speak on radio shows, podcasts, even a national talk show. My story lit a fire across the country. Suddenly, homeowners from as far as Oregon and Florida were reaching out with similar stories: wells destroyed, water rights ignored, HOA boards acting like mini dictators. Then came the real twist. My land wasn't just any rural patch, it was sitting atop a rare underground aquifer that a university had studied years ago. The HOA's long-term goal? Tap into it and commercialize access. My well wasn't just in their way, it was the key to their expansion. When this information surfaced, the city slammed the brakes on everything. An emergency injunction was placed on the HOA's water lease. They couldn't use it, modify it, or renew it without an ethics hearing. The hearing? Open to the public. I showed up with a binder 4 inches thick, a USB drive of footage, and a crowd of 50 supporters. The HOA sent 2 lawyers and Laram, their smug president, who once told me my well was a relic of the past. She wasn't smiling this time. I played the drone footage. I handed out the audio transcripts. I read every clause they'd violated and every homeowner they'd harmed. Then I pulled out a mason jar of cement-filled water from what was once my well. "This," I said, "is what they did to a legal, sustainable, privately maintained water source. Out of spite, out of greed." The hearing erupted.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
Spite, out of greed. The hearing erupted. Lorraine's lawyers tried to spin it, but the evidence was overwhelming. The city voted unanimously. HOA water services suspended indefinitely pending criminal and civil investigation. That night, the sprinklers didn't come on. Lawns browned. Faucets hissed. Residents finally turned on the HOA board. Emergency meetings were held in driveways. A recall petition started circulating within hours. 2 board members resigned by morning. I, meanwhile, brought a call from a non-profit offering to fund a new deep-bore well, this time with legal protections, fencing, and monitored access. I accepted. Construction began the following week. In under 60 days, the HLA went from smug rulers to a board in freefall. The city launched an oversight task force. Property values dropped. And my ranch? Greener than ever, self-sufficient, and respected. But the most satisfying moment came when I was invited to present my findings at a statewide symposium on water rights. Lawmakers, legal experts, and homeowners listened as I detailed exactly how I took on an entire HOA, and won. After the event, I was approached by a senator who offered to co-author legislation inspired by my case. We began drafting what would later be called the Rural Water Protection Act, designed to give landowners legal recourse when utilities or HOAs commit acts of sabotage or coercion. That same month, Lorraine was hit with a personal lawsuit from the State Attorney General's office for her role in the destruction of my well. Depositions began. Discovery opened a can of worms. Secret communications between HOA board members discussing ways to bankrupt the stubborn rancher. Photos of my property taken without consent, and even records of payments to city inspectors who had previously dismissed my complaints. The dominoes fell fast. 6 more HOA board members resigned. The HOA's finances were audited and found to be riddled with mismanagement. Their bank accounts were frozen. Meanwhile, the independents expanded their network across 4 counties, creating an alliance that helped dozens of others push back against similar HOA abuses. When my new well came online, I threw a celebration. We called it the Water Rebirth Barbecue. Over 200 people showed up. We had music, food, and even a lawyer who gave free property rights consultations. I stood up at sunset with a glass of fresh, clean water from my new well and made a toast. To every landowner who refuses to bow, to every drop they tried to steal, and to the power of one jar of cement. The crowd erupted in applause. And we're just getting started. When the concrete dust settled, I thought the battle was over. But I had only cracked the surface of a war buried beneath decades of silence, corruption, and fear. After I froze the HOA's water contract and exposed their illegal activities, my name became something whispered at town halls, posted on message boards, and shouted across country lines. I wasn't just the guy who stood up to a local III had become the symbol of every homeowner who had ever been bullied into silence. The messages came flooding in. Emails from farmers, ranchers, suburban families, even apartment dwellers, all sharing horror stories of unjust fines, illegal utility cutoffs, and intimidation tactics. I compiled their stories, each one worse than the last. One woman in Texas had her garden bulldozed because it didn't fit the aesthetic. A veteran in Nevada was evicted over a flagpole. A family in Georgia had their electricity rerouted during a heat wave. That's when I knew it was time to build something bigger. We launched the Water Rights Alliance, AIR. It started as a legal hotline based on my ranch. But within months, we grew into a network of lawyers, engineers, environmentalists, and retired judges. The WRA's mission was simple: defend landowners, protect water access, and dismantle corrupt HOAs. We offered legal support to victims, created blueprints for HOA reform, and published a nationwide report titled Concrete Control: The Hidden War on Water. It didn't take long before state senators were calling. Local news turned into national coverage. We were invited to testify before state legislatures, and I personally addressed 3 different assemblies. But the HOAs fought back. Hard. One night, a team of masked vandals broke through the west fence of my ranch. They slashed tires, cut irrigation lines, and spray-painted "Water isn't free" across my barn. But they didn't know I had installed motion-activated drones. Within an hour, sheriff's deputies had 3 of them in cuffs. Their arrests linked back to a private security firm funded by you guessed ITAN HOA lobbying group. It backfired spectacularly. The footage aired nationwide. Donations to WRA tripled overnight. More volunteers joined. More lawyers offered pro bono support. Entire neighborhoods began organizing. Some voted to dissolve their HOAs entirely. Others forced leadership changes. We weren't a support group anymore. We were a resistance. Meanwhile, the original HOA that started all this collapsed. Lorraine, the woman who ordered my well filled, was indicted on multiple charges: conspiracy to sabotage municipal infrastructure, destruction of private property, and falsifying documents.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
Destruction of private property and falsifying documents. Her trial was public, and I testified. When the jury foreman said guilty, it felt like justice had finally come home. But justice wasn't enough. We needed change. I returned to the State House and proposed the Homestead Water Act, a bill that would prohibit any HOA from interfering with private wells, alternative water systems, or rain capture devices. It passed unanimously. A senator even joked, "If this man says it's good for the land, it's good for the law." But we didn't stop there. We built a data portal that tracked HOA violations across the country. We launched an app called Well Watch, where homeowners could report abuses in real time. Within 3 months, over 25,000 reports were filed. Then came the call from Washington. I was invited to meet with the President's Rural Affairs Council. I shared our findings, our work, our vision. A month later, the federal government launched the Landowner Rights Task Force, and WRA was named as one of its key advisors. With this new federal attention, the tide truly turned. More state governments introduced anti-HOA legislation. One state even dissolved 3 entire HOA districts after uncovering decades of fraud. Entire communities began transitioning from HOA rule to community cooperative boards, governed transparently and democratically. We began holding homeowner freedom rallies, and tens of thousands attended. I gave speeches in open fields, school auditoriums, and courthouse steps. Each one ended the same way. You don't need to fight alone. The water may run deep, but so does our will. And then something I never expected happened. I was nominated for Land Advocate of the Year, an award given by a coalition of environmental groups, rural development agencies, and civil rights organizations. I didn't win, but I didn't care. The recognition meant we were no longer invisible. At the 5-year anniversary of WRA, we published a commemorative report, From Concrete to Clarity. It included stories from every state, stories of resilience, resistance, and redemption. On that day, I returned to the very spot where my well had been destroyed. The new well stood tall and strong, encased in a protective dome with a solar pump that powered an entire section of the ranch. A plaque beside it read, "You tried to bury us, but we are water, and water flows." As I looked out at the horizon, I realized the battle that began with one filled well had become a national movement. And maybe, just maybe, a turning point in how this country respects the land and those who live closest to it. But the impact didn't stop there. Universities began studying the WRA movement, producing papers on civic engagement, property rights, and the socio-political dynamics of land access. Major think tanks cited the WRA as a case study in citizen-led reform. At an urban policy symposium, one speaker declared, "If the land can speak, this man is its voice." Meanwhile, grassroots training centers were established across 10 states. These were boot camps for local leaders teaching everything from community organizing to property law basics. Some participants went on to run for city council, school boards, and even state legislature. One even became mayor, crediting the WRA movement as her inspiration. Media didn't lag behind. A full-length documentary titled Well Enough Alone premiered at an independent film festival and was quickly picked up by a major streaming platform. It captured our early struggles.
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
Streaming platform. It captured our early struggles, the drone footage of the vandalism, Lorraine's trial, and the broader cultural shift. It won several awards and sparked a new national conversation about homeowner rights and HOA overreach. On social media, hashtags like #ConcreteRevolt, #WaterWarrior, and #FreeTheWell trended regularly. What began as a fight for my ranch, well, had exploded into an ecosystem of reform that touched every corner of the country. Even high schools and colleges started integrating our materials into civics courses. Students read excerpts from WRA case studies and even participated in mock HOA negotiations, learning firsthand the importance of advocacy, negotiation, and civil baccarat. Responsibility. In response to demand, we launched the WRA Academy, a fully online portal where homeowners could learn about their rights, access legal templates, watch training videos, and submit their HOA tabulae. Agreements for review. It served over 100,000 people within the first year. Then came the international chapter. Rural communities in Canada, Australia, and even South Africa reached out, asking to adapt our model. We coordinated with NGOs and local activists, helping them craft similar programs based on their legal frameworks. The movement wasn't just American, anymore it had gone global. Back at the ranch, we converted the old feed barn into the WRA Archive Visitor Center. People came from all over the country to walk the grounds, see the rebuilt well, and leave behind letters, photos, and stories. We displayed them proudly. Each voice added weight to the collective will that had pushed back against injustice. As the years passed, we watched HOAs adapt. Many dissolved or reorganized voluntarily. Others partnered with WRA to develop more humane policies. The most abusive ones? They were systematically dismantled through legal channels. And in the center of it all stood that well. The well that once held cement, now flowed with clean, cold, protected water. On the 10th anniversary of its sabotage, I hosted a memorial. Hundreds came. We planted trees, unveiled a mural painted by students from across the state, and shared stories. The last speech of the night was mine. I looked out at the crowd, people of every age, race, and background, and said, "Water is life, land is freedom, and when both are threatened, we do not bow. We build, we rise, we restore." Then I turned the valve and let the water flow. It gushed from the tap like a river of resilience. That was the day I knew. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was all of ours.